If you feel like you're constantly reacting, struggling just to keep up, and never getting ahead, it's not because you're failing as a father, it's because you were never given a system or plan that works. For generations, men learned leadership, fatherhood, and how to run a family from other men who had already walked the path. Today, you're on your own, controlled by a world that wants you distracted, weak, and reactive. But there's a way to fix it. Whole generations of us were brought up without any kind of holistic formation. We were caged animals on a narrow track, moving our way to one piece of cheese to the next through public education, institutions of higher learning, corporate rat race. And now we need to be able to think more broadly. We need to think more holistically and separate ourselves from some of those bad ideas that inspired or accelerated the choices that were made over the past 75 or 175 years that have led to this state of ruin. The other element is mentorship and support. So here on the screen, this will be very familiar to the veterans in the audience. Some people in the corporate and managerial space may also come across this. This is the OODA loop, OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. Now, this originated back in World War II. There was an Air Force fighter pilot who was trying to develop doctrine to better train pilots to win dogfights. And he distilled down the dogfight mechanisms into these 4 steps. And then once that model had sort of been refined, it began being extended and extrapolated metaphorically to all sorts of decision making at all sorts of levels, not just the individual level, but all the way up to, thinking at a high strategic institutional level, thinking through these 4 steps of how a decision is made and implemented. So at the observe phase is your data collecting. Right? The individual is taking in sights, sounds, motion. There's just a lot of data, a lot of sensory data coming in the observe phase. In the orient phase, you're making sense of the data. You're trying to figure out what the patterns are and how to identify, extrapolate, what's going to happen next based on what's has happened up to this point. How do I put these clues together, connect these dots in such a way that I can now anticipate the next thing that will happen? And based on that, I make a decision about what I'm going to do. Now, when I execute my decision, you can think about this in a dogfight sense, you can think about this at like a corporate strategy sense. I decide, okay, here's my strategic choice, or here's my tactical maneuver that I'm going to make. As soon as I begin making that, as I'm acting, I put that into action. That feeds my observe phase again. Because now, 1, time has passed. 2, I've changed the system. And 3, in the time that I've been making that decision and putting it into practice, other actors in the environment are also making their decisions and actions. And so now I have new data to observe, right? So I have to once again bring in new data and orient on it again, synthesize it, pattern identification, extrapolate, so that I can make my next set of decisions. One of the big takeaways of this model is that those who succeed are the ones who can make faster and better iterations on the OODA loop. You have to move through the phase quickly. Speed is essential. Quality is also essential. So you have to find how to harmonize those things, because there's obviously some tension between speed and quality, particularly like you think about orientation, synthesizing information, making projections and forecasts. You can spend a lot of time doing that, or you can spend a little time. That trade-off is very situation dependent, but the core concept here is that you, the viewer, the father, the man out there in the world who has grown up in this environment, you are an independent operator. And there's a huge world of information out there that you're trying to observe and you're trying to orient on. But your attention, of course, is divided because, unlike me, you have not spent the last 4 years, in all likelihood, stepping back from your career to focus on this problem set exclusively. You have limited time to do this observing and orienting. So your decisions and actions are not well informed. That is the huge limitation. If you want to be ready to seize this opportunity to strengthen, to improve your family life, your children's childhood, then you need a way to speed up your OODA loop. You need a way to get more and better data coming in the observe phase, And you need a reliable way to synthesize that information and forecast, to project, to develop plans, consider alternatives. And it's simply beyond your limited bandwidth as an individual. Because once again, until 175 years ago, no human being had developed the biology or the neurology or the operating software, the cognition to operate independently. So we've painted ourselves into this corner where the very decisions that we've made that have put us in this terrible spot not only yield terrible consequences, but also undermine our ability to get ourselves out of this situation. And so it requires deliberate and aggressive action on your part to recognize and remedy these limitations so that you can speed up and improve the quality of your OODA loop. And so at Fit for Fatherhood, the training progression covers 4 dimensions: physical, mental, adaptive, and emotional. This is a training progression that a man today who wants to seize that opportunity can go through to rediscover, synthesize, and apply, model, and coach others in his orbit to become more physically, mentally, adaptively, and emotionally healthy so that he is prepared and those around him are prepared to flourish. And so a lot of this has to do with taking what is now an overwhelming storm of information and competing narratives, separating out the wheat from the chaff, identifying where the truth lies, the timeless, transferable, universal principles, and organizing them in a manner where from the ground up we can rebuild a model of fitness. Prior to 175 years ago, you would have been able to rely upon your brothers, your father, your uncles, your grandfather, other men in your community as mentors, coaches, to hold you accountable, to help you better orient and make better decisions for yourself, for your family, for your community. Given that you are not in that situation today, and given that there's not that network just waiting for you to come back to in all likelihood, the question now is, how do we, you and I, rebuild a network like that? What would it take for us to stop being isolated individuals and start being members of an authentic community of people who are invested in one another's long-term well-being and flourishing, who are operating from a similar playbook, going back to that Fit for Fatherhood curriculum, and helping one another build the life that we want for ourselves, for our wives and children, and for our future generations? What would that take? We need to remedy the fact that right now we have a very slow and unreliable OODA loop. As individual men, we need to find a way to band together and to pool our ability to collect the useful data out of the noise and synthesize that in order to formulate plans and strategies and hold one another accountable, providing one another support and accountability and mentorship in implementing our individual strategies. No matter what program you apply for, you will go through this entire progression from the ground up. It's just a question of the degree of depth and how thorough or how fast from program to program. That's the variation. But that is why the Fit for Fatherhood model is organized the way it is, to provide a holistic and logical progression from the ground up across these 4 dimensions. You now understand the problem. Men today are expected to lead without any proven playbook, without a team, and without any framework. And that's why fatherhood feels impossible. But now the real question is, where's a system that actually works? And where's the roadmap to get us there? That's exactly what we'll cover in the next video. Click the link on the screen now, or use the pinned comment below. And in the next video, we'll go through a step-by-step roadmap to reclaiming fatherhood.